Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for coming on down to WinchesterFest tonight. We have some excellence in store for you. This is Articulated Arvon. So I was very lucky in March before quarantine, pre-quarantine times, back in the realms of time. I had the opportunity to go on an Arvon retreat in Devon. And while I was there, I met some amazing poets, and you are lucky enough to have three of them with you tonight. We have Miller Tebbs, we have Rachel Lewis, and we have Rachel Cleverly. And this is going to be sort of a Q&A and a poetry showcase to get to know them a bit better, to get to know the poet behind the words, and then to hear some of the words that make the poet. So without further ado, our first poet of the evening is the wonderful, the brilliant Rachel Cleverly. Not only does she write with the most beautiful social commentaries, she balances humor, she balances more serious things. She basically can write about anything. You give her anything and she'll write about it. She has a master's in creative writing. She's been published in Ache magazine, and I've no doubt that soon she's going to be publishing also her own collection. So can we please give a massive round of applause for Rachel Cleverly?
Hi.
Hey, Rachel.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for being with us tonight. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
That's no problem at all. Okay, so can you tell us, what role does poetry play in your life?
I think it's changed over time. Like, I used to call myself a poet when I was like 15 and I hadn't written anything. And then I kind of felt like I had to fulfill that dream because everyone kept asking to read stuff that I'd written when it didn't exist yet. But then I actually started writing at the kind of end of the second year of university. And I haven't stopped since. I did my master's in creative writing last year, so that meant that I spent kind of a whole year just writing, so that was obviously a really big part of my life. But I've recently started working, so it's a slightly smaller part of my life, but it's still a very important one.
Excellent. And like I say, you don't have to do poetry as a full-time profession to be a poet. I feel you. I feel you completely. So kind of in the same vein then to that question, when did you first start performing poetry? When was your first performance? Do you remember?
Yeah, so I did a kind of beginner's intro to poetry at Oval House Theatre, which is in Vauxhall in London. And that was like a week's long intensive like writing thing, and then we did a performance at the end of it. And it was really nice at the time because everyone there hadn't really done anything before, so everyone was at the same level and we were all really scared. And yeah, since then I think I've done some bigger gigs and some smaller gigs, and I think I definitely prefer the smaller ones and the ones where you can kind of recognize people in the crowd rather than where you can't pick anyone out. Yeah.
Okay. And so then I'm guessing, was your first poetry performance quite a while ago? Do you remember how old you were, roundabouts?
Yeah, I was 20, I think. So
okay.
Actually not that young, yeah.
So between then and now, how would you say your relationship with poetry has changed since your first performance?
I don't know. I think I go through phases of preferring page poetry and then phases of preferring performance poetry, and it's definitely something that shifts a lot and I can't really predict it. Like, there's points where I don't perform for like 6 months and I just kind of decide that I hate it and I don't want to do it ever again. But I'm still like, I'm always writing, but I'm just like, this is purely a page thing. Like, I don't even want to read my work in front of anyone ever. And then there's other points where I just feel like it's so nice to get kind of an immediate reaction from people and for people to tell you that they like your work or give you feedback. And I think that you don't get the same kind of raw reflection from people when they just kind of sit and read your work and then come back to you, or there's a lot more of a chance that they just kind of go like, oh yeah, I liked it. But like, when you can actually hear people laugh or see their faces and things like that, it's a lot better to observe as a writer, I think.
Brilliant, brilliant. Oh, some great answers, honestly. I feel like I've put you on the spot, so thank you for giving us such, full answers. So I guess I should maybe talk about the Arvon Retreat a little bit. I mean, it's where we all met. So what did you enjoy most about the Arvon Retreat?
I think that I'm definitely someone who, like, I am quite confident, but I think I tend to be more confident around people who aren't. And so I was initially quite scared to go on the Arvon Retreat because I was like, oh, these are all going to be poets who know what they're doing and who love to perform and are like love drama and love to just like get on stage and like get into a different kind of character. And I know that when I'm around people like that, I just like retreat into myself and I'm like, oh, okay, you do that, I'll just be quiet, whatever. But it was actually really nice. We had like a lovely mix of people from kind of places all over the UK, and they all had very different relationships with poetry themselves. Like some of them it was like a full-time thing, other people it was just something they picked up in the past couple of years. And it was nice to have kind of an entire week to get to know each other, and I definitely think that we had a strong bond, and like obviously we're still talking now, so that's really lovely. And I'd never kind of managed to foster like a strong kind of relationship beyond the courses that I've done before, so this has been really lovely.
Thank you. And I guess in a way it kind of prepared us for quarantine because we were all stuck in a house for a week without social media. So actually, in a way, we were super prepared for when quarantine came about. So what else I would like to ask is, have you got any projects that you're currently working on? Anything that's in the mix?
Yeah, so as you said in the intro, I've just been published in Ache magazine, so that's really exciting. That came out a few days ago. I don't have a copy yet, but I will. And then I am just beginning to start writing a new project that I actually talked about and kind of had the idea of at the Arvon Retreat, which is very much in its beginning stages, but quarantine has some benefits, I would say. And so that's going to be a kind of collection about itching, is the theme.
Nice. And will we hear any? I'm hoping we're going to hear some poems about itching tonight.
Yeah, you're going to hear a couple scratchy poems, I would say.
Ooh, I can't wait. And so thank you for telling us about what projects you're working on currently. And finally, not so people can stalk you, but if they want to go actually, see your poetry in the flesh, whereabouts are you based?
I'm based in London.
Based in London. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And if you're ready, would you like to take to the stage with some reading for us, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure.
Brilliant.
So the first poem that I'm going to read is one that I know that the other Rachel on this call has had before, and it's called Love Bugs. I met Vicky on LinkedIn. 12 GCSEs and a D in Spanish. Founder, acting director, and exterminator at Bugs Be Gone. 3 people had endorsed her attention to detail. I would too, but the continuation of our relationship suggests her profile is stronger than her skill set. I first saw a bed bug the day I began moving my boyfriend's things in. He'd just started trying to leave me. I've been stuck in a kind of cycle, sleeping with my phone torch switched on to spot the bugs, which I've stopped doing since the time I drifted off, inviting Vicky, the exterminator, to connect on LinkedIn. We kind of DM'd a bit. I sent tasteful nudes of my back when I found pox-like bikes, but it turns out it was just a melted bit of chocolate, which somehow seems even more disgusting now. And I don't know why, but just not attracted to me at all. I've remained impressively bite-free, which actually makes me feel pretty dirty. Like even they don't want me. They love my boyfriend though. I was worried he liked them too. I kept trying to wet my sheets with eco-friendly bug repellent, but he used it as an excuse to stop staying at mine. After the nude, Vicky, the exterminator, leaves me on red. Then 4 hours later, try and get your landlord to buy a new bed. So I soaked my coats instead. Then I called my estate agent and told him what Vicky, the exterminator, had said. Honestly, that's the estate agent to me. Communications with your guy are patchy at best. He works somewhere proper exotic, like Congo or somewhere. There's not a lot of service there. My landlord's LinkedIn lists him as a retired antiques dealer in Benidorm. Myself, I kind of wear the coat of a nervous traveller, but Vicky, the exterminator, she tells me the Northern Line carries 3 times as many pests as the average overground carriage. It does now, I used to think, as I came back from my boyfriend's place. I'd crawl past Kentish Town with a bag full of bed linen, too scared to sit, so I just kind of hold my hands up and out from my lap and sort of squat. The good news is the boyfriend has to stay at mine now. I've not been over to his house since his mum saw me pulling a shrunken hoodie from the dryer, and I don't know why, but I whispered, "I'll be keeping this for our grandkids." I was just trying to save her from an infestation. So then, it felt like our relationship problems had kind of been exterminated since we'd been living in my flat. We steam my sheets together each day 15 times, and though the bugs in him weren't really up for anything, boyfriend would just kind of wrap his arm around his knee, roll over and turn his back to me. It's threaded with tiny love bites no bigger than the head of a needle. So I just start slipper shuffling through the flat to pee and slipper shuffling back, and I find him on his front, shirtless, legs trapped in the flap of pajama bottoms. He's hugging a bug, and I am jealous, wishing for the feel of tiny teeth on my shoulder. "A bug?" I say, head roaring over the tumble dryer's snore, then louder, "A bug?" until he hears. We assess the bedroom guests like a passionless middle-aged couple, inviting a third person in under the sheets. The bug looks relaxed, like he's done this before. Boyfriend pinches him, like a loose piece of string, light as cotton, and rolls him between finger and thumb. The bug stretches up a flirty arm. He's waving and knows this is the end. He's saying, "Goodbye, Vicky the exterminator." He's saying, "Goodbye, cohabiting," and "Goodbye, boyfriend." Boyfriend's hand goes into a fist. The stitches of my life come unpicked. A blood-stained dot on his pointer, the size of a needle, a little prick. And that's the first one.
Thank you. Oh, that was so good.
Thanks. It's
We'll
really
do a
weird.
massive clap for you. We'll do a massive clap for you at the end, okay? So it doesn't delay for our listeners.
You want, yeah.
Of course we
It's
want.
really weird because I can see you all reacting above me, but then it's just like silence as you're like
silent reaction.
Yeah. You know. Okay, so the next one I'm gonna do is non-itchy. It's called Cream Cracker. The lights cracked dark across the street. Dad was the one who could fix a fuse. He wasn't home. Mum opened the crackers. My brother used the knife to cut softening cheese. We should have gone to bed, but felt our way, one-handed, to the window, lined our party plates across the sill. The biscuits, like moons, spotted with lactose cubes of delicious cheddar, yellow against the dark. The power came back on. Dad had followed the crumbs. Still suited, he found us, huddled and rattling, biscuits stacked in a tin. We were cold without heating, with butter melted on our chin. So that's the second one. And then I've got 2 more short ones, which I hope is okay. Okay, this one's called Rhubarb. My dad is in the garage, unravelling cobwebs from his trowel. His head is pumping tomato red. He only weeds in crisis, and the Angmering Allotment Association have sent another letter. They think Dad's nettles will blow seeds and plant weeds in other people's patches. Our plot is full most months until evenings bud with emergency trips to Dad's lot. Laundry lines the back garden, the shopping list grows. My sister waits, rooted like a thorn for someone to pick her up from the playground. We eat crumble from a dirty tray, and I save spoons for when Dad needs help digging. When we're done, our back garden is overrun with weeds. The fridge is empty. I sharpen my tongue to tell Dad how I've eaten only leaves, but he hears rhubarb, 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 and serves me the sting of nettle soup. That's the third one. And actually, strange coincidence is that is actually based on my dad, who doesn't keep his allotment in good shape. And right now it's looking impeccable because you're allowed to go to the allotment in quarantine. That's the news for you. Yeah. Okay. And then the last one is called I Lost It Down the Back of the Sofa, but It's Okay Because Mum Found It. And this is actually the poem that I wrote on the Arvon Retreat, fittingly. Luke is 11, I am 8, Nat is 5, we don't have enough teaspoons. I am too big for shared baths and sleep with stuffed sausage dogs. The inside of my elbows are itchy and my eczema gets worse. Luke gets ill and stops going to school. Nat's sobs come out bubble shapes when she drinks bath soap. I scratch in my sleep. The sausage dog goes missing. Mum gets mad at me asking for it, and I stop. Luke wants to go to Australia. My dad drives him from South Croydon to Purley. They park on the roadside. Dad says, "This is Australia." And Luke looks up the road, and Luke looks down the road. And Luke asks if they can go home now. Mum promises chip butties and Mr. Whippies midweek if I promise to go quietly. I pretend I don't mind leaving my friends. I scratch my arm until it pops with bubbles of blood. Me and Natalie sit on the front step with 2 guinea pigs as men with brown boxes shift my things. They pick at my room like a scab. The pigs purr and twitch pee. I get up and I go indoors, and the living room is this way up but turned on its side. Mum is deflated and her skin is blistered without sleep, but she's under the sofa pulling out a still sausage-shaped shadow. It's squash patty flat, more burger than frankfurter. I take the dog by its back legs and beat her against my thigh to stretch and plump. "You're hurting her," says Mum, reaching for my blood clot fingernails. "She's a toy, Mum," I say, stuffing her into the boxes marked Rachel's room, Tetrised into the van on the driveway. There you go.
I'm so happy you finished with that one, because I remember when you read it at the Arvon Retreat, and it was just, I loved it that time. I loved it the second time. I knew the last line was coming, and I was like, yes. Thank you for being here tonight, Rachel. I don't really have enough words to say how much I enjoyed that. For a poet, I am actually really shit with my words right now. So thank you ever so much for being here. Thank you for telling us about your process. Thank you for chatting to us. Thank you most of all for sharing your beautiful work with us. Just before I let you go for a little break, a break for you, do you have any social media so our listeners can keep up to date with your poetry adventures? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I do. So I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and my username is @Rachel_cleverly.
Awesome. Thanks again for being here. And one more time, please, a massive, massive round of applause for Rachel. Okay. And the next artist we have to the stage up for some chats is the wonderful Milla Tebbs. So a little bit about Milla. Milla, in my opinion, and I'm sure in lots of other people's opinions too, the thing I love most about Milla's work is the way she captures effortlessly everyday life with really vivid imagery. Like, she reads me some of her poems. I've had the honor of being able to edit some of her poems because she asked me to. And it was a massive honor because I got to read just some of the most beautiful ways of talking about everyday life. And I really felt like I was in the poem. And it's just, you're so bravely tender. Your work is just so, you're so vulnerable in your work. And, I wish I could be as vulnerable as you are in your work. Mm-hmm. She has a book published with Big White Shed. It's called Sometimes I Fall Asleep on the Sofa, and I'm sure we can all relate. And if you can, grab yourself a copy because it is no doubt excellent. And yeah, so without further ado, can we welcome please to the stage Miller-Ted.
Hi, hello.
Hey, how are you today, lovely?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right. Went for a walk by the lake, which was nice. So I'm doing good. Doing good.
Excellent. Yes, it's really important that you're taking care of yourself during quarantine. And of course, to all the listeners at home, listening to an online poetry festival, I'm sure is helping. Okay, so my first question then is going to be, I'm going to mix up a little bit. When did you first start performing poetry? Do you remember when your first poetry performance was?
Yes. I was 16. I joined 2 collectives in Nottingham, sort of at the same time. And then went to my first open mic. But neither collective survive anymore. But one was Mouthy Poets, set up by Debris Stevenson, and the other one was Right Minds. And then I did my first open mic at Jam Cafe, which is the heart of poetry in Nottingham. It's a little brilliant bar that also is a good place to go for a boogie. But it's a good place to do poetry in Nottingham.
Oh, brilliant. Is this the same place you wrote your poem about dancing?
No.
Is this the same venue?
It's not actually. No, it's not. It's a different venue.
So then, how would you say your relationship with poetry has changed since your debut performance?
I definitely used to write very much for me. I actually started writing as a way of processing a lot of stuff because I had a lot of trouble with mental health in my teenage years, and writing was my way of working out what was going on. Whereas now I find that I still write for me, but a lot of what I write is for other people as well, if that makes sense. So it's definitely changed in that sense. I'm more conscious of my audience now and my reader than when I first started. It was just me sort of brain exploding on the page, I guess.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so happy that everyone's been giving such full answers. So then I guess sort of similarly, what role does poetry play in your life kind of at the moment?
At the moment, I'm doing loads at the moment because we're in quarantine, so I'm writing all bloody time. But day to day, I have a 5-day-a-week job that is far from poetry. So I try and do poetry stuff throughout, but it's hard, I guess. So at the moment, it's definitely like a very small side hustle that's hopefully will eventually be a bit of a bigger side hustle. But I'm one of those people that I don't want to be a full-time poet. That's not the end goal for me. I love my job, and but I'd like to get to the point where I'm part-time poet, if that makes sense. Whereas at the moment, it's very sort of that big.
I think this is the thing for creatives. Quarantine has actually been really helpful for, because you've suddenly been given like the gift of time, and you have the time to write. And I've been following you on Instagram, and you publish some really beautiful poetry readings. What else do I want to ask you? I am going to go back to the Arvon Retreat, because this is why we're all here. It's why we all met. It's why all the listeners are now listening to us. So what did you enjoy most about the Arbonne Retreat 2020?
Similarly to Rachel, I've been on Arbonnes before, but this is the first Arbonne I went on where I didn't know anyone. So I was crapping my pants, basically. And it was really nice to meet people that you wouldn't normally have met. Obviously, we all came from all over the country, and all have, well, not all, but a lot had very different angles into poetry. So that was really lovely. So I thoroughly enjoyed, we did a night where we all read each other some of our favourite poetry. I really enjoyed hearing other people's favourite work. That was amazing. But mostly just sort of finding you was amazing. Like finding each other's skills that would help you. So like for me, I find that you edit my work brilliantly. So therefore I'm like, brilliant. And so sort of matchmaking skills from people was a really valuable thing for me.
No, I definitely agree. Like, we were all so different, but like we were all united by poetry, but we all have such different skill sets, and I think that's definitely something worth tapping into for sure. So have you got any projects then that you're currently working on? I mean, I'm guessing so, being in quarantine, and what are they?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm sort of doing two things. I'm starting a full-length collection, sort of slowly. I'm in the research stage at the moment, but I'm starting that at the moment. And sort of the rough guide which I'm willing to expose is just autism in females, is sort of the rough summary. And then my second sort of project, which has started recently, is 80% of my friends are musicians, and I'm working with one of my friends who's a guitarist on, he's put some stems down and then I'm doing poetry over the top. So we're going to do an EP together of that. So that.
I'm very excited to see what wonderful things you are no doubt going to be doing with the rest of your 2020 and beyond, of course. So then, just before we move into listening to your lovely poetry, can you tell us whereabouts are you based? Are you still in Nottingham, or are you somewhere different now?
Yeah, I'm in Nottingham. Just Nottingham in the East Midlands, if people don't know. The East Midlands does exist. There's not just North and South.
You're in the no man's land.
Yeah.
No, I'm totally kidding. So without further ado, can we give a massive round of applause, please, to Latebs, who's going to be... I can't wait. Can we give a massive round of applause, please, to Miller Tebbs?
So,
take it away, Miller.
As you just mentioned that, I'm actually going to do a poem first, which is about my hometown. And it's a poem called Halfway Nowhere. I'm looking over here because that's where my laptop is. I'm not being rude. When you first ask about my hometown, I will say where it is not. Halfway between Notts and Derby. My dad instilled in me from a young age that we were from Nottingham as he buttoned me into my Forest baby grow. But our postcode started DE. I never really knew what to believe. When you scrunch your eyes and repeat the question of where, I will reference the bus route. The I-4 from Market Square will take you right to my road. If anything, that bus is my most treasured keepsake. I can't remember what life was like before getting my Mango card. It's funny how my strongest connection to home is escapism. When you ask me what my village is like, I will struggle to find words. It's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Technically, we only have 6 streets. John's off license is in the neighbouring village, and we have more farmland than domestic properties. We are the in-between land. If you continue up my childhood street, you will find no man's lane. When you question if I miss it, my heart and mind will respond separately. I won't be going back. As much as I miss the fields and the fact that there's still a working phone box on the corner of First Avenue, I outgrew this village. Spent so much of my life walking the tightrope of identity, I couldn't bear to tread that halfway point again. When I ask you if you'll take the I-4 with me, let me show you why I avoid grey areas. You will laugh. Why bother going halfway nowhere? That's that one. Rachel's right, it's funny being able to see all your reactions. I've been writing a poem every day for the past, since January. And obviously at the moment it's National Poetry Writing Month. And ironically now I'm suddenly struggling. But I'm still doing a poem every day. So a lot of these are from that. I'm gonna jump into one which doesn't have a title yet. We sat in silence for longer than I was comfortable with. Your eyes focused in front. With no landscape to admire, you made do with letting them cross into blurred vision. One layer of boz-eyed, one layer of tears. To stop you having to see the sadness staring at you. I tried to comfort, attempt a hand on the thigh, an arm round the shoulder. Both were shrugged off. I produced a sad-looking satsuma from my bag, peeled it in one go, hoping to impress you didn't uncross your eyes. Another tear stained your jeans. I passed a segment over, placed it on its side in your palm, slightly discoloured and covered in pith. It was hardly a peace offering, but it's the best I could muster. In return, you uttered the first word for longer than I was comfortable with. Tar. Sucked on its weathered skin. Spat a pip out. Finally, your eyes uncrossed. Stagnant fingertips wiped the remnants of tears, and you focused on me. Your palm reached out. Asked the sadness in front of you for another piece of peace. Yeah, a lot of these are ones that I've just been sort of scrambling throughout the past quarantine life. So they don't have titles yet. So bear with me. Yeah. Our sisters were friends, and we were both short. Primary school logic deemed it only natural a friendship was formed. But now it's withered, or rather splintered into promised catch-ups and liking each other's Instagram posts. Your cheeks aren't as round as they once were, and both our hair's seen its fair share of dyeing. My sister was your sister's bridesmaid last year, and I didn't get a wedding invite. You're tall now, well over 6 foot. I remain short, and wonder if you outgrew me before I did you. I don't know what I expected. You haven't known me for years. The last time we spoke daily was when my mind wasn't in one piece. But our lives keep meeting each other's. We reconnect fleetingly in moments of chaos, and I don't believe in fate. But I do believe something in this world wants us to know each other again. Wants our friendship repotted. I reached out with naive hope, channeled through WhatsApp, that maybe you hadn't outgrown me, that perhaps your mind had also tangled into submission to our spark. I got a 2-word response. You may be in a completely different conversation with our relationship. I was always the overthinker. To you, I could just be the past, the friend who your mum helped with math homework. I wonder if we would still be close had I not moved schools in year 3. I fear we're not meant to be consistent in each other's lives. Our sisters are weaved so intrinsically together, yet we splintered before full grown. I've long since given up being a constant presence in your life, but I hope you don't just see me as a primary school pastime. Our friendship may be withered, but it is continuous. That's that one. Where should we skip to? Oh, let's do all of the sort of looking back nonsense together. Been looking back a lot at the moment. I've never been good at science. I got put in top set in year 7, thanks to my sister's STEM club legacy and friends who always helped me with my homework. As the years went on, I got demoted, and then demoted again. I could never light the Bunsen burner. No matter how many times I was shown I'd shake too much, didn't trust myself around naked flame and gas. So much gas. I've argued with every science teacher I've ever had. Mr. Hawkins would make me cry and not even wait for the tears to dry before another dig. When I had to take animal biology at college, my tutor did an intervention. Me and my science teacher sat on lab stools, worked out a plan to ensure I didn't run out of class. I still did. Used my veganism to get out of practicals. There's always been something about laboratories. My chest tightens the moment I step inside, legs shake like I'm back 14 again, 6 pills a day, long sleeves, always. I don't know what the trigger is. Science reminds me that I've never been good at it. And I know it's okay to be crap at some things, but I want to reference chemicals and DNA in my poetry. Yet I only learned that H2O was from water from a TV show about mermaids. That's that one. We'll go. Oh, I'm going to do one about Nottingham. They're all quite little. This city is big enough to feel like a city. The streets bustle at night and many hustle with the doorman for free entry at bodega or stealth. The pigeons are unforgiving. They will defecate wherever they deem fit and often huddle at the square. No, it's a meeting point. Skateboarders are far from an endangered species, and cans of red stripe litter any patch of grass in the vicinity. You will say a polite "ay up" to at least 3 people on your daily commute. It's not so much an everyone knows everyone city, as much as an everyone knows everyone's cousin or auntie that's not really your auntie, just your mum's best mate. This city isn't big in an overwhelming way. You can walk the length of it in 20 minutes, and there's rarely a queue at train station barriers. The streets are paved with comfort, and tales of the lace industry echo down Maid Marian Way. And then I'm just going to do one more for you, which is, I've never prayed to a god. Much to my granny's despair, I would always mumble when she took me to church, when we visited, and my mum would go to afternoon tea with her school friends. I never paid attention, crossed my fingers behind my back if holy words were pulled from my vocal cords. Even on my darkest days, I never sought comfort in a higher power. Tune out of conversations when they turned to religion, having nothing to add. Part of me wishes I did believe, or had believed, or had some sort of remnants of faith. It's not that I think I'm above it, or too realistic to believe. I just struggle to trust things I haven't witnessed firsthand, haven't been shown a diagram, find the abstract unnerving. It was never forced on me. My parents wanted us to make up our own minds. There was never a Bible in our house. Not that I wish I'd been expected to believe in something, but sometimes I fear I missed out. I was conditioned into atheism with no force. And now, if I were to pray, I would feel like a fraud, or worse. I wouldn't know how to do it.
Thank you, Milla, for being here. I mean, I promised our listeners that you have really beautifully. I'll start again. I promised our listeners that you had such beautiful, vivid imagery, and I mean, you fucking delivered. What can I say? That was fucking beautiful. Thank you ever so much for being here. Thank you ever so much for sharing your words. Thank you for just giving us a glimpse into your life, and how Milla in the past became the Milla we know today, we know and love. So can we give Milla, please, a massive, massive round of applause? I know you can't hear us clapping at home, but I hope that you are clapping at home. So just before we finish, Milla, can you tell our listeners, do you have any, we know you have Instagram, but just so they know the exact, usernames, forgot the word then, usernames, do you have social media so our listeners can keep up to date with what you're up to?
Yes, I'm really terrible at social media. It's either Mumbling Milla with a dot somewhere. I think that's what it is. I think it's Mumbling Milla with a dot, I think, in between the mumbling and the Milla. And then it's Mumbling Milla on Twitter as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you ever so much for being here today and for sharing your work. And once again, a massive round of applause for Miller, please. Okay, so our next poet to the stage, we have a Rachel sandwich for you tonight, guys. So we had Rachel Cleverly, we had Miller Tebbs, and our final wonderful poet of the evening is Rachel Lewis. And what can I say about Rachel Lewis? I mean, I met her at the Arvon Retreat. I honestly don't think there is another person that could have collated an anthology of our work in such a short turnaround of time. I mean, she got everybody's work, she edited everything, she wrote a beautiful preface. I mean, there's no way I could have done that. So she astounds me. She's award-winning. She can talk about humorous things, she can talk about serious things, she can talk about anything and make it sound much more eloquent than I am being right now. She has a pamphlet published by Wordsmith HQ, if you have a chance to check it out. I believe it deals with sort of eating disorders and sort of mental health issues that go along with that. It's called 3 Degrees of Separation, and yeah, definitely go and check it out. I mean, not right now, of course, but afterwards, definitely go check it out. So I would like to welcome to the stage, please, Rachel Lewis, everybody. Take it away, Rachel. How are you today?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can see you and I can hear you.
Well, there we go. Oh, I can see myself chilling. Okay.
You have the spotlight now. So can you...
introduction.
So can you tell us, please, Rachel, what role does poetry play in your life?
So I would say, I don't know, it kind of plays 2 roles. I think talking to what people have said before about it being something that you can turn to when you have something difficult to say and you need to work through things, and then also something that really brings you together with other people from different walks of life as well. Like, those are both really important to me. So when I write, I'm often saying things I feel like I can't tell anyone, and then paradoxically going out and then telling it to a whole load of strangers who then sometimes really wonderfully become friends or become people you admire and who like your work. And it's, I don't know, I feel like it's a way to get out of the bubble of your own mind, but also bring some of the bubble with you.
I think that's such a beautiful way of describing it. Like, I can see why you're all writers, man. So when did you first start performing poetry? Can you remember your first poetry performance?
Vividly, it was terrifying. So I wrote poetry for a long time before I understood performing was something I could actually do. Like, I knew spoken word existed. I thought it was very different to poetry. I thought it was not my thing. I found it very intimidating. But then I did a course with Poet in the City on how to put on poetry events. They're a live poetry organisation based in London. It was really helpful. And quite a lot of people who did the course with me on putting on events also performed, and being exposed to what they did and seeing how good they were and how much they loved it just made me think I have to be a part of that. So I went along to a random open mic night, and weirdly, I'd never seen this anywhere else. They had a really great poet there, Sarah Howe, and she gave feedback to everyone after the performance. So that was what happened. The very first time I performed, and then Sarah Howe was like, that was nice, Rachel, you really could have done more with rhythm. And I was like, wow, that's terrifying. But I don't know, I've really grown to love it, I think. And it's just such a wonderful way of meeting people and sharing your work and hearing what other people have to say.
For sure. I mean, I don't know about you, but I definitely I was kind of like trying to find my niche a little bit. And I went for a few years where I didn't really know where my niche was. And then I met other poets and I was just like, I found my niche. These are my people.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
And I noticed as well, you do quite a lot of work within the poetry community. I think it would be fair to say. Can you tell us sort of some of the projects you've been working on, some of the projects you're involved in? What are they?
Yeah, well, when I was at uni, I ran the University Writers Network, and I was also involved in May's anthology. So that was like a poetry publication. I was an editor on that. And then I've done some I was a poetry reviewer for the Adroit Journal, which is a really great American poetry magazine you guys should check out. and also submit to, because they take open submissions all the time and their work's really great. I put on some live events with Poet in the City, which I really liked doing. And now I'm trying to get into facilitation more. So with someone from the Arbonne course, actually, Elspeth, we're trying to become a facilitation duo and like figure out how we can put on poetry workshops online. And so we both have day jobs, but we both get volunteering leave from our day jobs. So we're like, how can we volunteer by, I don't know, bringing writing to places and people it might not otherwise be at. Slightly disrupted by coronavirus, but we think we can do it online.
Of course. I mean, we've got this showcase happening right now. I mean, anything's possible in 2020, you know.
Exactly.
I have no doubt that I know how organised you both are, so I have no doubt that you'll make that
Elspeth
happen.
is so organised.
She is so
puts me in organisational shade.
Do you have any personal projects then that you're working on? Sort of any books in the pipeline?
Yeah, so I'm working on a new collection about my family history. So my dad's side of my family are all Jewish from Belfast in Northern Ireland, and I think I had a kind of realization about a year ago that this is quite unusual. Like, it's a very small community. It's like declining in numbers. People move away. People often come to England and then kind of lapse out of following religion as well. Sometimes it's kind of a disappearing niche. And I've just started trying to find out more about it. And as I've been finding more about it, because I'm a poet, I've started writing about it. So I think there's a collection in there somewhere. I'm still very much at the research stage, but kind of open call to anyone in the audience. If you know anything about Jewish history in Northern Ireland, if you're interested, if you have any ideas, let me know, because I've been talking to people and everyone I talk to has great ideas. So please help with my research.
Okay, and so that's what you're doing at the moment. So how would you say, sort of between your first performance and what you're up to now, how has your relationship with poetry changed in the interim?
I really related to what Miller said about when I started out, very much feeling like what I was saying was what I had to say because it was in me, and that's what I had to say. And now I think more consciously about like what I want to talk about and what I think I want people to hear. That you become more aware of your audience and kind of why you're doing what you're doing, and should it be in this form or in this way, and how can you approach it. And I feel like that has been it's been a slow process but an important process for me as a writer. And it's been really interesting to kind of go from being like poetry is about me I guess, more to what can I say as a poet.
And I think that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant to kind of explore the confessional, but also what can we do as poets for other people. Definitely.
I mean, I really love confessional writing. I just did it. I tried it first, so that feels like a journey.
Now, I think any way we can get our thoughts down on paper is always a good thing to do, for sure. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, I guess I should ask you about Arbonne. I mean, it's where we all met. So can you tell us, please, what did you enjoy most about your experience at the Arvon Retreat this year?
The food. It was so good. And there was so much cake.
There was so much cake.
Okay, that is a serious answer, but also in seriousness, being around people who are also serious about writing, because obviously people did come at it from different perspectives. Like, I have a full-time job doing something else, but I'm really serious about craft and trying to make my poetry as good as I can be. And I really felt like that was something we all had in common. And it was just so nice to be in a space for a week where everybody was a poetry geek. Like, when do you get that opportunity? It was wonderful.
Like, honestly, and especially because your bedroom and my bedroom were right next door to the poetry library. Perfect. So just to finish off then, whereabouts are you based?
So I'm based in London. I live in NW5, which is kind of northwest. Although at the moment I'm online. I mean, we can join poetry events in like New York or Moscow or wherever, but normally I am in London. Oh,
excellent, thank you. And I believe, do you have some work that you're going to read for us?
I do. I thought I would do, if that's all right, I thought I would do a little bit from the pamphlet and then some new stuff as well. Is that okay?
Of course, definitely show the front cover though, so our listeners know what to look out for. There you
Isn't
go.
it beautiful?
Everybody at home. Okay, well, can we please welcome to the stage then, please, to perform her wonderful poetry, Rachel Lewis.
My turn to
Take it
experience
away,
the
Rachel.
silence clap. I've enjoyed it. I'm excited to experience it more. Cool. So I'm going to do some old poems and then some new poems. So some are in the pamphlet and then some are in my notebook. As Laura mentioned earlier briefly, pamphlet deals with some stuff about eating disorders and recovery and mental health. So no worries if you want to go put the kettle on, come back for the new stuff. It's a bit, I don't know, less miserable. But yeah, it was important for me to write the pamphlet because I wanted to explore my own experience talking about the confessional stuff before, but also thinking about mental health in the context of relationships, because I feel like the relationships I've had with people who have suffered from mental health issues that are often quite stigmatized, so like eating disorders, suicide, personality disorders, have been some of the best relationships in my life. And I think I wanted to celebrate the love that I have for those people, as well as I guess go into some of the difficult stuff. So that's what's in the pamphlet. And I'm just going to do, there's a few stories in here, but I'm going to just follow one because I find when I do readings it's too much to try and go into all of it. So I'm going to follow the story of May, who's one of the characters in the pamphlet. And the first poem is called May in the Tent. Slices rolled up tight to bite-sized, melted cheese squeezed out at the sides, 2 chews and gone, swallowed. 8 times, urgent, fingers licked. The bit they'd let her brother build was slipping, a streak of living room was staring into their lost pyramid of bedding. Em retied it without thinking. May re-entered with the secret code, curled up on the duvet throne, and then it was just 2 of them, agreeing there could be no God, that no boys liked them, till sleep came through the blanket walls for them. And this is when May and Emma are a bit older, and this is called May Drunk. They were bottles down, giggling drunk, red wine staining the cracks in their lipstick. Empty streets were all around them, but they were strung by lamplight on one chain. They could not shock each other anymore. Their bodies crossed on the sofa, the rug, the floor. They climbed into Belle's bed and there heard what each had to say, lose, share. And as they drank, they felt the world close in on their jokes, on them, their fearlessness. And this is when they're a bit older still. This is May's party. It was laid out like a photograph. Asparagus wrapped in ham with hollandaise, green tips peeking above their swaddling, not a 15-year-old's party. May was a hostess from the first. Smiles lit laughter at old jokes, some too old, some that May didn't know her friends had left off. The atmosphere broke only once, when May had flexed to lift a jug, revealing her arms to be tortured with muscle, unnatural, like an animal, like an athlete, as she poured. Where we go next? We'll go May at home, which is the next one. The hospital was beautiful, not what she'd thought. From a creaking public service on its knees. It was white-fronted, almost stately, with unrolling gardens, and May had been living there longest. She showed Em all the cushions she had made, and how all the bedroom doors had windows. She had papered her rooms with magazines, deep reds bled into rustic browns. She asked permission to remove her jumper. Her arms were voluble. They mouthed verses of scarred, raw, stripped back skin. Madness hovered between May and Em. Em talked to hold away the end of hours, when one would have to leave and one would stay. May gone. Missing. Missing woman, missing girl, missing. May missing from the place she had been held, from that nameless ward, from no place to live, from that one night that became 8 months. There had been no more money to be spent, and so she stayed, and so she left. Em stayed up clutching gifts from May, A notebook May designed, the cover read, "The butterfly counts not months, but moments, and has time enough." But Em found more later. They brushed against her hands in piles of papers as if in homecoming, like the letter with the drawing of what May was surviving, a stick figure, cowed under rampant waves. And do 2 more from this one to kind of finish the story. May returned, held in the waiting room, facing, has someone died? Restoring hope, and a leaflet for death for known, for grief, and a stock photo flower for each. The coffin frightened Em. What if it moved? If death came out? Then Joe said it looked like a laundry basket, and then they were laughing, bursting the miserable funeral home with it, remembering, crying, laughing again. Em's bus home was impossible. Life without May breathed on and on through their unfolding city. Em and her brother. The sea unrolled itself towards the sky. The waves rushed in from forever away, left seaweed at their feet to dry, retreated, hushing what they had to say. Em held out a knot for him to try, and he, a man so suddenly that day, untied it for her, understanding why. Nothing more you could do anyway. Their mum stepped on a jellyfish and hopped off, clutching at her toes, while seagulls wheeled and laughed with them, at this madwoman, screeching as she goes. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of the pamphlet. If you're interested in it, it's available through my Instagram, on Amazon, and through Wordsmith website, that's the publisher. And for every copy I sell during lockdown, I'm going to make a donation of £10 to Beat. Beat are an eating disorder helpline, and it's been a really difficult time for people with eating disorders. The whole lockdown thing is like, I don't know, a whirlwind of everything terrible. And I feel very grateful to be this far in my recovery, and I think it's important to support them in this time. So yeah, that's my plug. That's my plug bit, which Laura knew I was going to do. So I have sanctioned to plug, and I've done it now. Cool. I've still got a bit of time, which is very generous. So I'm going to do a couple of new poems, which are a bit more upbeat. And if you don't like them, let me know, because they're still drafts, so I can still fix them. So if we get lots of negative comments, I will take that as, feedback. Cool. So as I said, new poems are kind of focusing on my family history, which is Jewish Northern Ireland. So as most people know, Northern Ireland in recent years has been famous for conflict between Protestants and Catholics, called the Troubles. And people aren't really aware a lot of the time that there is a kind of third community, or even a fourth community. There are Muslims in Northern Ireland, there are Jews in Northern Ireland, and it brings up a lot of interesting tensions that I've been finding out more about through my research. And this poem is called My Father's Father Crossing the Irish Border During the Second World War. And the only context you really need for it is to know that in the Second World War, Northern Ireland fought with the United Kingdom, so was in the war, and the Republic of Ireland remained neutral. So crossing from one to the other was like crossing from a country at war to a neutral country. Cool, that's it, history lesson over. Enjoy the poem. Fear throbbing in his airways, actually flinching at first footstep from his front door. My father's father hurries down to meet the car, idling at the corner of Crumlin Road, spotlit by a blinkered streetlight. He slams the car door shut and they're off, through Craigavon, Portadown, Armagh, all eyeless in the blackout. As they fly round lane bends, knowing no cars will be out, red intentions overhead advance, bellies full of unbirthed shrapnel drag themselves through the night. But the little car skitters out of range. As they cross over the border, thread fields fading into murk, misting into silver, nothing. One night, they'd driven halfway to Dublin, and then, overcome with terrified laughter, turned right back around and were home before 1. One night, they'd made it to Dundalk and been chased out of a pub when they tried to pay with sterling. Tonight, they're prepared. Stack of Irish pounds, best shirts, egos brushed, shoes polished, dancers practiced in the hallway mirror while the family were out. They're ready to meet Irish girls, who everyone says are easy, would be the word boys would use today. The car has no radio. They sing anyway, and yell when the car crests a hill, and the aureate lights in Monaghan give them a fearless wink. And they park on the high street and listen for the sounds of a good time, find it giggling, dancing, shouting, eating, drinking, and themselves petrified against a wall, watching older boys dance with girls like it's the easiest thing in the world. They drink, the edges of their fears blur, the party warms their backs, and when the singer finally drops down to order drinks, my father's father steps right in to pay, one elbow on the bar, one arm around her waist like he had always been there, till she shrieks with laughter, runs to her friends, burning with cheap beer, embarrassment, glued till the spot, till the barman closes up, and they stumble to the car, arguing who's least drunk and therefore has to navigate the bumbling re-entry into Belfast. The morning rolls up to meet them, like a badger in a bowler hat. They tip my father's father out into reality. He inches the front door open to find his father, or my father's father's father, slippered in righteousness, hands folded round a cup of coffee made with powdered milk, and the blackout blind still drawn, and the headline something about Germany again. And his father looks at him squarely, his face extremely still, as if appraising. And he asks him whose side he is on in this war, and if he thinks it is all a good joke. Cool. Do I have time for one more quick one? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Knock us out.
Cool. All right, last one. And I can't say it's cheerful, but Lauren didn't bring me in for cheerful. She knows it is. She knows what's up. It's called The Tale of Patrick Fitzpatrick, who was killed by a car bomb as he walked to music school sometime after 1968. Patrick Fitzpatrick disappeared in a cloud of smoke and was totally incinerated, nothing left. Or only half bombed, but the teacher screamed like a banshee a split second before it happened, and all the boys turned to look at her instead, so none of them saw his other half. Or he dropped dead just 3 boys behind my father's brother in the crocodile of children on their way to music school, and my father's mother cried for a week that it could have been her son. Or he was stood right behind my father's brother, and my father's mother could never bear to speak of it at all. But Patrick Fitzpatrick was every time always the only boy in music school who'd fight any boy or girl who used the Virgin's name in vain. And his brother was probably an IRA man, and his father was almost certainly an IRA man, and his sister was once seen leaving the house late one night with a large suitcase and climbing into the back seat of a blue car with a well-suspected yet still well-respected banker sympathiser of the IRA, and then never seen again, my father's sister told me. Only the once, though. Nobody liked to talk about it. That was everything I had today.
Thank you.
A minute to spare.
Thank you for being here tonight, Rachel. If no one's ever told you before, and I doubt they haven't, you are a born storyteller. The way you just managed to incorporate the history with the words and just some beautiful, beautiful poetry. And this is not something like my mum will tell you, like I am not quiet very often, and your poems leave me speechless. They just, yeah. That's all I can say. They're so good. You made Laura shut up. What else do I need to
way
say?
too kind, but it's been so nice being here and hearing everyone. I feel very lovely to be in such company.
So before we give you our massive round of applause, do you have social media handles so that our listeners can, follow you in the interwebs?
Interwebs. I only have Instagram, so if you don't have Instagram, sorry, but it's at Rachel Lewis Poet.
Okay, and are there any full stops in there, or it's all one word?
Well, there are some underscores, but I think if you just look Rachel Lewis Poet, it comes up.
Brilliant. Well, can we just say give a massive round of applause and a massive thank you to Rachel. Thank you for being here tonight. I know the ghost claps are weird. We're getting used to it.
I love them. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Okay, so just before we close for tonight, we're going to have a little bit of an open session. We're going to have a little bit of open heart surgery with poetry. So we're going to have a little bit of discussion with the whole floor. So we have Rachel Cleverly, we have Rachel Lewis, and we have Milla Tebb. So we're going to have all three of them to come to the virtual stage. So all of you, what advice would you give to someone who's procrastinating or is struggling to write or has writer's block, just in general? What advice would you give to someone who is struggling to write right now and wants to write something?
Can I go first?
Of course you can.
Look at online poetry workshops. There are tons happening all the time. Debris Stevenson has been doing some on Instagram Live. She was doing them every morning for the past 3 weeks, but she's only going to do them once a week from Friday, I think. So the next few days, she's still doing them every morning on her Instagram. And then it's going to be like once a week. But yeah, look, if anything, I'm doing more writing workshops now than I was doing before lockdown. So I'd say do that. Also, one thing that I would say, which is something that Bogdan Piasetti always says, which is just shit your way to greatness, which is just write or just so write. And it's probably going to be rubbish, but you have to write the rubbish before you find the good.
Completely. It's like my mum always says, you can't edit something that's not there. You have to write stuff. Well, I'm sure actually someone else said that, but that's who I remember saying it. Anyone else? So Rachel, what advice would you give to someone who's sort of procrastinating or struggling to write?
Yeah, Milla's advice is really good. I agree with all of it. I've also been taking advantage of all the online poetry workshops. I think something that helps me sometimes is to make myself like outwardly accountable, like say I'm going to do something to someone else and then I will write it because I have to, like even if it's as simple as I said I'll send my friend a poem to give me some feedback, or I'm going to bring a poem to a workshop, or I'm going to bring a poem for an open mic. If I have a deadline other than myself, that really helps me get over the block. Yeah, that would be my number one tip. I think also using found poetry sometimes, because it's like a fun trick, because sometimes I'm like, I don't know how to say this, but if you pick up something random, you're like, I have to make a poem out of the back of a cereal packet, or this paragraph I found in this novel I'm reading. It can help get over the I don't have any words.
Definitely. I think prompts are such a big thing as well. Like quite often if I'm struggling, I'll randomly text my mum and I'll be like, Mum, can you give me like 4 words? And she won't even ask me what they're for anymore. She'll just assume they're for poetry, and she'll give me some like really obscure nouns, and I'm like, right, okay, poems, let's go. What about you, Rachel Cleverly? What do you think? What advice would you give?
I think that, yeah, I agree with all the advice that's been given. I think that quarantine is good in the way that there are so many things available online that aren't normally, especially if you're not in London. I think it's been really helpful for reaching like regional writers, because it's not easy to be so far from kind of the hub of it. I think my only other piece of advice would probably be to just not put too much pressure on yourself. I think that it's like you can, I don't know, I think there is a lot of pressure right now to kind of emerge from coronavirus with your masterpiece,
like
and
a butterfly.
Yeah, and I think honestly coming out of this in one piece and in as good a place as you kind of went into it is actually such a feat. So well done for that. And if you come out slightly worse, that's still well done, because it's like, this isn't normal and it's a lot to go through. And I mean, I think the first week of lockdown, like I couldn't even read more than like a couple pages before I just get distracted by the news or what was going on. So like, honestly, like do your laundry and then feel accomplished, it's fine.
I think that's really important. Like we live in such a big culture that's like we always have to keep doing stuff, and you know we've been kind of conditioned to feel like if we're not doing something we're kind of failing our day, or we're kind of failing ourselves. And I think especially in the time we're living in quarantine, in lockdown, you know, it's really important to actually think about, listen to your body. I know it sounds hippie, as my dad would say, but you know, do some yoga, listen to your body. What's your body telling you? Like, if your body says you need a day just to sleep, have a day just to sleep, you know? Anything you need to do to come out the other side in a better place, do.
And try not to sorry, I'm just jumping in. Try not to
No.
if you're struggling with writer's block, try not to compare yourself to someone else, because I find sometimes, especially at the moment when it's National Poetry Writing Month, we're all seeing like some people come out each day with a fully functioning poem, and I'm like, I've just written like a list of things that make me smile. Do you know what I mean? Like, try not to compare yourself, because as long as even if you're just thinking, you're doing poetry. Like, it might not be on the page, it might not be on the stage, but you're doing poetry. You don't have to write poetry to be a poet continuously, if that makes sense.
Okay. So that's what I want to ask you guys. I have an interesting question. I've never actually asked this in an interview before, so I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work, but we're going to give it a go anyway. If poetry was a person, it could be any person you want. If poetry was a person, what are the first 3 adjectives that spring to your mind to describe it? Who would like to go first?
Shall I go? Because no one wants to go.
Yeah, I feel like at school. What do you like?
Miller,
Does anyone know
you're the
the
person
answer?
that goes first.
Woo, Miller.
I'd say, I mean, the first word that sprung to mind was mundane, because I think a lot of my personal favourite poetry is finding the beauty within the mundane. And then following on from that, I would say beautiful, I guess, is more the adjective. And then chaotic. I find a lot of poetry is chaotic. And if a piece feels too, in my personal opinion, if I want to enjoy a poem, if it feels too sort of cut out on the wall in a frame, picture perfect, it unsettles me and it draws me away from it. It sort of becomes a bit elitist and not as inviting. So chaotic would be one of my words.
What about you, Rachel?
It is so deep. Mine feels silly now. My first one was sexy. I think poetry is sexy. I want to know more about it. Like, it draws me in. My other ones were brave, and my other one was capricious, because I feel like, as somebody who's tries to write poetry, sometimes it feels like it's your friend and it's going with you, and other times it feels like, no, I don't want to play with you today, and you don't know why. I did actually, for the course that I met Rachel on, I wrote a whole poem about like having a romantic relationship with poetry, so I feel like that just came out again in what I just said.
I want to read that poem.
Yeah, hit us up, please. What about you, Rachel Cleverly? What do you think? What do you think about 3 adjectives to describe poetry, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I said narcissistic, because I think it can be, not always, but sometimes. I said provocative, so that's kind of a bit similar to the other Rachel. And then I also said quiet, because I think that a lot of the time it's not, I mean, it can be shouty, but I think a lot of the time it's not shouty, and it's kind of like a slow burner, and it really kind of, I think it's quiet in its expression, but it has like these big ideas. Yeah.
Excellent. Such excellent answers. I just feel glad that I just had to write the question. Okay, and just finally to finish, this is the window where I'd like to give you some time to plug any other poets that you really love, or even writers in general. Are there any poets or writers that you would wholeheartedly recommend to our listeners at home?
I'll go first because that's what I'm doing now. So I've got 3. One of them, I don't actually have any of the books with me of this writer because it's one of my favorite books. I think I showed you 3 at the retreat, but I always lend it to people, and I lent it to someone, so I don't have it. But it's a collection called The Anatomy of Being by Shin Ji-moon, who is a Korean American writer, and it is beautiful. And she is amazing. Another writer that I would check out is Ursa Daly Ward. So that's Ursa Daly Ward, and this collection is called Bone. It's a bit water damaged, but that is also a beautiful one. And then my sort of not all poets come from London plug is a dear friend of mine called Marisa Mckee. Now Marisa is part of a collective called Quiet Riot, which is an international collective of disabled artists who communicate through non-verbal communication. So Marisa is non-verbal herself, and this was her most recent collection, which is called I Can Still See the Sky. And me and Marisa's poetry is very similar in the sense of finding beauty in the mundane. And she's just such a beautiful, beautiful writer and an amazing activist as well. So yeah.
Thank you, Milla. So Rachel Cleverly, are there any poets or writers that you would wholeheartedly recommend?
Yeah, so I think that I didn't want to go for just like my favorites, because I think you get tired recommending the same people, and I thought that I would try and go for something that can actually help people right now. So the first poet that I want to recommend is Cecilia Knapp. She does loads of work with the Roundhouse. She is a playwright as well, and she's doing a live stream every Wednesday at 2, I think, for an hour, and she gives really good writing prompts and really good advice. So I definitely recommend that if you want some free and remote workshop stuff. And then my other recommendation is a pamphlet called Lasagna by Wayne Holloway Smith, which Outspoken have just launched, and it's free to download on their website right now because of the virus. So that's really nice. And I actually read that today, but I really enjoyed it. And I think that it's really nice having just like free poems available. And then my final thing is more advice, and that is just that loads of places are making all of their content available online, and that's a really great opportunity for people who have kind of financial barriers and also like geographical barriers, and so I would just say try your best to really enjoy that while you can, especially if you feel like that would help you feel like you like are doing something productive. So like something that I'm really enjoying right now is Burley Fisher Books have a podcast that's really great. Yeah, so that would be my thing. Sign up for everything, do everything online if it's going to make you happy.
I mean, what can I say? Like, I have the exact same thing. I live in rural Spain. There's no poetry events in English. Because of quarantine, I get to go to at least one poetry event every week. Like, it's crazy. No, thank you ever so much for your recommendations. And finally, Rachel Lewis, do you have any writing or poetry recommendations for our lovely listeners?
I do. I'm gonna recommend a couple of people I've been reading just because I'm really obsessed with them, because they're helping me with my research stuff at the minute, thinking about how do you write about history and archives and families, if anyone is interested in that stuff. I just read Surge by Jay Bernard. It's so good. They did research into the New Cross fire and spent ages in the archives and produced this really stunning, like raw but incredible collection. I finished it like last week. I'm really not over it. And also I really loved, I just read Chick by Hannah Lowe as well, which is a story about, well, it's a poetry collection of looking at, I guess, the story of her father, and it's just really interesting. Go look it up, Hannah Lowe, Chick. And then my last recommendation, similar to you guys, I thought I would recommend the open mics that I've been to recently that I liked and thought had a good vibe and were welcoming if you want to dial in online. So I went to Hammer and Tongue Open Slam, and there's one again in May, which is really nice. BYOB, which stands for Bring Your Own Bars, they were really lovely. Boxed In, happening online once a month, so I just sat in for the last one, but I'm going to try and get on the open mic next time. And then also there's one called Troubled Tongues, which is happening every day, and I don't know how the guy who organizes it, Sunny, has the strength, but every time I've like dialed in to listen to it, it's just really lovely. Like there's so much, it's just 1 hour, it's 7 to 8 every day, and there's just so much enthusiasm, and people have been joining from like America and Russia, and it's really fun. It always cheers me up, so I would recommend that one as well.
Thank you ever so much for telling us some events as well. I don't know about you guys, but when we went into quarantine, I set up a hashtag on Instagram saying writing workshop, and I've been just finding all kinds of workshops being run by people, and I would just, even something as simple as setting up hashtags, poetry workshops, writing workshops. There's a field of stuff out there. Whiskey and Beards, who are hosting WinchesterFest 2020, the lovely Whiskey and Beards folk have a lot of artists who they have their books on offer at the minute, or they have books available to read for free. So definitely check out Whiskey and Beards website, check out what the Whiskey and Beards artists are up to. Long story short, they are all wonderful. And yeah, I mean, they've been Rachel Lewis, Rachel Cleverly, and Miller Tevs. They've been freaking wonderful. Audience at home that are watching now or are going to catch up later, you've been freaking wonderful. Thank you to Connor Sansby, the wonderful man who runs Whiskey and Beard. Thank you for hosting this Zoom session and YouTube session. And thank you to all of you guys, everyone who's been involved with this. Thank you for being here tonight and being part of WinchesterFest 2020. It has been an absolute honor to have been sat virtually in the same room as you guys and to have hosted you tonight. So thank you ever so much for being here. Can we give one massive round of applause, please, to Miller Tevs, Rachel Cleverly, and Rachel Lewis, please?
And also to Laura for hosting.
You're all brilliant, and thank you, everyone, for being here.